The snow is melting and Yeti's latest beast is out of hibernation. Join us today while we dissect the new TQ HPR 60 powered MTe. Let's go. Hey folks, we got a pretty fun dissected episode today. So again, this is the MTe. It is Yeti's latest e-bike, and it is, I guess, what we call the e-bike light category. A lot of cool updates from TQ in this HPR 60 drive unit, and obviously not an update, but an entirely new bike from the Yeti lineup. We actually met with two of the key members from the Yeti team who we will be talking to and interviewed recently about the development of the new bike. This is a bike they're really excited about. They said they learned a lot with their full-powered 160e e-bike, and this was a category that Yeti, fancies themselves a little bit more of, like, the analog 140-ish category rider. So this was something they were really into. High-level stuff here. 145 millimeters of rear wheel travel with their Sixfinity linkage, 160 millimeters of travel up front. On our particular build, there's 3 models available. Well, one of the builds is kind of more like that Pinner XC super light mindset. This would be kind of more the everyday shredder. Maybe I would put it towards a lunch ride style bike with that, over forked front end. So TQ continues to use their harmonic pin ring, which delivers a near silent and very fast engaging mid-drive motor system. What is new about this drive unit, high level, is the increase in power. It is now 60 Newton meters of torque and 350 watts of peak power. There is improved power delivery as well as an addition of cooling fins to help better manage the heat of the drive unit. And so powering this new drive unit on 2 of the models is the 580 watt hour battery. On the lighter XC model, it is a 290 watt hour battery. Sizes medium and up will work with the TQ range extender. So if you buy that light, smaller battery model, or if 580 just isn't enough for your big missions, medium and up will accept that TQ range extender. Also new is the display unit in the screen. It is now a colored unit and features some new metrics that are displayed, as well as a lot of cool information and just a little bit better user interface, as well as updates to the app. So moving on to the suspension of the MTe, again, 145 millimeters of rear wheel travel using the Sixfinity linkage. Now, the Sixfinity linkage was first developed for the full power 160e e-bike that Yeti released several years ago. Now, this bike sits somewhere between their non-electric mountain bikes and that 160e in terms of anti-squat, anti-rise numbers. We talked with Stretch, who is kind of one of the key guys in developing that Sixfinity platform, and he gave us a lot of great information about the balance and blend of pedaling efficiency, traction, support, and the overall comfort and compliance that they wanted out of this bike.
So I think you can talk about suspension maybe in 3 key points would be, what your acceleration response is, what your deceleration response is, and then also talking about your leverage rate, how the shock is working relative to the suspension. And so there are some key differences there. First of all, and I guess one way to think about it is there's sort of 2 fundamental limits when you're talking about acceleration to start with. The first limit would be if you have basically a traction limited vehicle, or if you have a power limited vehicle. And so I think those are good, bookends of how we describe what we're doing with anti-squat. And it can be a little bit counterintuitive. So essentially what we're doing is scaling our anti-squat value inversely with how much assist you have. So on our 160e, for example, our anti-squat level is actually relatively low compared to what we would do with a traditional pedal bike. So we're looking at the magnitude of that curve, and it's right around 100% on anti-squat, versus our pedal bikes, which are actually quite a bit higher than that. So what we're recognizing is that on a lightweight assisted bike like the MTe, you're sort of in between a pedal bike and a full power assist. So we want to scale that anti-squat appropriately. So we actually have higher magnitude anti-squat values on the MTe than we do with our 160e. And that's totally intentional. And because we're trying to bias that suspension a bit more towards the efficiency side relative to the 160e, when all you're trying to, our main focus is gaining traction because you have plenty of power. And then on the other end of the spectrum, say a pedal bike, where we're trying to even increase that anti-squat magnitude even higher to make sure that we're keeping the efficiency. And I think maybe to add to that would be, what we're also trying to do is maintain what we've learned on pedal bikes as well with anti-squat in the actual shape of the curve. So when when the suspension goes through its travel, similar to Sixfinity, where the mechanism is first moving up and first moving down, our linear mechanism, we have that same analogous motion that on the Sixfinity as well. So that lower link is first raising or moving up, and that's equivalent to actually increasing the anti-squat and keeping it high around sag, so you have a very efficient pedaling platform. And then as you get further through your travel, that switch link then reverses and starts moving down. And that's analogous to having that anti-squat curve drop really quickly. So we're getting the benefits of efficiency where we want it, and then we're dropping that as quickly as possible later in the travel to have a really plush suspension.
So as you heard, the goal was to deliver a bike that erred a little bit more on the side of efficiency, closer to their non-electric mountain bikes, just to give a little bit more of a traditional Yeti feel. So I think, that 160e was by far from a couch or a Cadillac out on the trails. It still offered a pretty sporty and lively suspension feel. So I think traditional Yeti riders and those of you who like a more stiffer platforming feel are really going to enjoy this. The MTe will have 4 leverage rate positions available via 2 sets of flippable chips. You can run either 12 or 14% or 23 or 25%, depending on your preferred feel and which works best for your shock, depending on the spec. Those of you who may own a 160e will note that those progression figures are lower than the full power 160e, and one of the main reasons for that was the weight of this bike is drastically less than that bike, so it overall requires less progression and support towards the end of stroke travel, just because it is a lighter bike. There is no difference between any of the frames in terms of carbon or their layups. They also all use Vectran, which is a treatment to help improve the durability and robustness of the carbon fiber. Moving into some of the other frame features, there is a ZS4456 head tube, so you are able to modify reach, headset angle, and kind of tune this bike in a little bit better to what you're feeling. And Yeti was actually thoughtful enough to kind of help riders that were looking to do that by giving them some marks within the head tube there, so you know where to set that system up to give you kind of a quicker install and adjustability process if you were to go that route. So 3 total builds will be available as of the time of filming. Starting price was $9,850 for the C3 model, going up from there. So what do the bikes weigh? 43.3 pounds for the more burly spec bike, and I believe the XC Pinner model, which we didn't get, is 38.6 pounds is what we were told for a size medium. So definitely going to be able to get those bikes in a size large, sub 40 pounds, probably in that 39 to 39 and a quarter, which is quite impressive. And I think some of those high performance mile cruncher SL riders are really going to dig this bike in that spec for sure. So there's a lot more detail on our website, theloamwolf.com, and of course you can always head over to Yeti's website to learn all about the specs and bits available on each of the models. But for now, let's head out on the trail and see what our first impressions are.
Okay, feels nice and lively so far. Pop.
Let's talk about the new HPR 60 drive unit. 220 pounds?
220 pounds, 100 kilos for the people in the metric system. And in the past, I've not been a huge fan of the TQ system with the HPR 50. For me, as a heavier rider, it just felt a little bit undergunned, and I was almost always of the impression that for the assistance, it almost wasn't worth having an e-bike at all for me. Certainly, I'd just had rides where I just felt like I was just as tired, but I'd maybe got up the hill that little bit quicker. But the new system, a considerable improvement, and actually I've been very impressed so far. Definitely errs on the slightly more efficient feeling side of things rather than being completely muted and comfortable in the saddle. But of course, the rock around here is about as janky as it gets. Still has the same really quiet operation, Like, you can barely hear this thing, even when you're in the turbo mode, pushing it hard. It doesn't start making a noise, even once you've got it up to temperature as well. No ability for it to cut out either. You know, we've been riding in some pretty hot conditions, extended climbs, and I've not managed to let it drop the power. Overall, feeling a lot more happy with this thing. And with that 580 battery that the Yeti is spec'd as well, the range is really impressive. It's definitely got some go. And I definitely wasn't quite keeping up with you guys on the full powers, but I wasn't feeling like I was getting dropped and you was just disappearing into the distance by any means.
What about user interface app with the new colored screen, connectivity with the phone and all that?
Can't get it connected currently. I think it's because it's pre-release. Maybe the app hasn't been updated to work with the HPR 60 drive unit yet. But that new color screen is much nicer to use and easier to see as well, especially in bright sunlight.
Should we move into suspension and overall feel of the bike?
It's a nice sort of all-round bike. I don't think it's got any particularly pointed characteristics, but it feels like it sits in a nice space where when you're in the eco mode going uphill, you still get enough support out of it that you don't feel like you're just sagging and wallowing all over the place. But it's not too stiff and firm so that you can't just pedal through chunk like in the saddle. Yeah, it's so far climbing at least it's feeling good.
Did you feel a need to make changes to that suspension progression chip yet?
I opted just to stick it straight into the more progressive setting out of the box. Figured that with the kind of low traction situation and quite a lot of square edge hits around here, that having it slightly softer off the top would be better to having it more supportive overall. And I've been quite happy with it. Even in that more progressive setting, it's not felt like wallowy and without any sort of support when you're pushing it.
First impressions overall of the frame, the look, general feel, design cues, anything like that?
It's still a Yeti, and in that way it feels super high quality. Everything is running really dialed, nice to work on, and ride impressions so far, yeah, on the trail, runs really quietly. Just feels solid and reassuring when you're pushing it, and been really enjoying it so far.
Okay, ideal rider.
Still an SL e-bike, so if you're just looking to turbo full power up the steepest, craziest climbs, then it's not going to be for you compared to a full power bike. But if you want some decent assistance to really help you get up the trail with a little bit less effort and a little bit faster, then I think this new TQ system is a really solid offering for that. And then on the way down, it's not just dip the heels and plow long travel e-bike, but it is surprisingly capable for a 145 rear end and just general trail or mountain light enduro kind of riding. It's going to be a really good fit for a lot of riders, I think.
Yeah, the increased power and that larger battery is really making SLs for someone like myself who kind of has been more of a full power convert. It certainly is enticing to sway me back over, because I obviously love the weight of these, you know, bikes.
That's it. On the way down the hill, it doesn't feel like a full power e-bike by any means.
Right.
And I love because it sits in that middle point between a non-e-bike and a full power e-bike. You get the slightly more planted feel of an e-bike in general, but still with the agility, you can still like dart it side by side to side, pick your lines out a little bit easier, and just have a little bit more kind of playful fun on the trail because of the reduced weight. And given that it's got a 580 battery, which is going to take you pretty far, I don't know, I'm pretty convinced that it's a solid option for a lot of people.
Absolutely. All right. Well, folks, there you have it. Thanks for tuning into our latest Dissected. If you have any other questions, let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. And if we don't have the answer, we'll reach out to Yeti and hopefully they can chime in. We will be keeping this bike for a long-term review and, of course, keeping it around, hopefully, if Yeti lets us keep it that long, until our SL e-bike shootout later in the year. Let us know what other bikes you'd like to put this up against. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you out on the trails.